Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Brear, and welcome to episode 78 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, here live on LinkedIn. In today's show, we're going to be continuing the Spotlight series where we feature the people behind early stage fintechs and upcoming startups, organizations working towards closing financial inclusion gaps, and people who are using their knowledge to really help communities. So today I'm thrilled to be, back in the hosting seat after Simon did a really good job over the last couple of days. I think we're going to be seeing more of Simon based on his performance there. But today I'm going to be joined by Asma Shah, who is the CEO of the You Make It charity. On this morning's show, what we're going to be doing is talking about how You Make It got started and the importance of diversity and inclusion across all industries. Good morning, Asma. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
I mean, I'm not fine. I'm really tired, but
I can be honest with you then. I'm tired.
I'm going to be as good as I can today and try and finish off as early as I can so I can try and catch up on some sleep. But it's been a busy week. Anyway, for those who don't know, can you maybe just give us a little bit of an introduction and tell us about what You Make It is all about?
So You Make It is an East London-based charity whose mission is to empower young Black and Asian women with the confidence, networks and skills and experiences to make it in life, not just in terms of work or setting up business, but also in a very personal way, helping them address their kind of mental health and overall sense of happiness.
Wow.
And I set it up actually from the very kitchen table that I'm at now, almost 10 years ago, having had previously a career in management within the cultural and creative industries.
Fantastic. I mean, that's an amazing. I mean, I just about get through my Weetabix at the sort of kitchen table. So you have very much greater aspirations than I do. But I mean, how did the organization come about then? Why did You Make It?
I would guess there are three main reasons. One of them is that my late mother, who was an immigrant from Pakistan, single mother, died of cancer, and I thought long and hard when she passed away about her journey in this country as a woman of color, the journey of me and my sisters didn't come from privileged backgrounds, and how we'd made it against the odds, but had to overcome quite a few barriers in the process. And I wanted to do something that helped women who were like me as I was 20 plus years ago. The second reason is that it was the beginning of austerity, and it was very clear to me back in 2011 that the signaling from government is that, you know, the state will be pulled back and those most vulnerable were much more likely to fall through the cracks. So I felt compelled to do something positive for those people whose lives risk being lost, actually. And the third reason is I live in Bethnal Green, Tower Hamlets, but on the cusp of Hackney, a very gentrified borough, but also a borough with very high levels of deprivation. And I was observing in quite a critical way those growing gaps between rich and poor, black and white, and feeling quite angry, actually, that people from less advantaged backgrounds within the context of gentrification were being left behind. And I wanted to find ways to work with women from those less privileged backgrounds so that they become more connected to the opportunities that were emerging in the East End of London.
It's amazing how many times that sort of really spurs people to do something and to make something. Because I mean, we had Dr. Sue Black on recently, and actually, I mean, she went through an amazing period, amazing struggles, and actually, once you've got through that, you want to help more people get through that period of time and make it a little bit easier. You know, you can never make it easy, but make it a little bit easier for people who are in a similar situation. So, I mean, where did the name come from?
As I recall, I sat around with my boyfriend just brainstorming the name, and our work is about empowerment. So while women are supported and helped and encouraged and nurtured by our program, the emphasis is very much on them using what we give them to make it in life. So I thought You Make It sounded like it kind of encapsulated the empowerment angle of what we do.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And in terms of the focus of the organization, as you say, you know, you're specifically sort of focusing on young women. Why is that a kind of a focus, do you think? And what's the sort of purpose there in terms of really sort of focusing down on that group?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I mean, obviously, I am a woman. I was raised in an all-female household. I'm a woman of color. And I think women of color experience a lot more discrimination. And I think we have such resourcefulness and resilience in us and talent, which is just so often wrongly overlooked. So for me, it was very much around working with women that I could really resonate with. And I think the beauty of our program and the impact that we have, just talking about impact, 83% of our women today are in paid employment or working on their own startups. 90% of women who start with us stick to the program. And I think that really strong outcome is because of the resonance they feel with our team. And I think that's a cultural, gender-based, and ethnic resonance. So I knew it was a job that I could do really well, but I also know that within the borough that I live, unfortunately, unemployment and underemployment particularly impacts the demographic that I work with.
Well, and particularly, I guess, in this period that we're in right now. I mean, we were talking about COVID just before we went live, and it's it's a even more testing period than really ever before. So, I mean, how has the current sort of crisis affected the work that you've been doing?
So we were due to launch our normal, face-to-face program in at the beginning of April, and obviously lockdown happened, I think, on the 23rd of March. We, within a couple of weeks, redesigned our program, pivoted really, really quickly to deliver online. So that's one of the key ways in that it's affected us as a charity. We've had to very, very quickly adapt to working in an online way, which I didn't think was going to have the same impact, because our work is so deeply relational and very holistic, and it's very much about hugs and having these really intimate relationships with women. But strangely, Zoom seems to have worked for us, and we're still making the impact that we want. In another way, COVID, we work primarily with women from BAME backgrounds, and you'll know that COVID has disproportionately affected people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. So a lot of the women that we know people who've passed away of COVID. And so they're going through grief and trauma, or they live in households where their family members are key workers and at very high risk. So we've kind of changed our offer online within the context of COVID. We've increased the number of therapy sessions our women are able to access. We increase the kind of contact we have with them on a weekly basis, because they're much more in need. We work with women already who are in isolation and lonely. I mean, COVID and social distancing has increased that. But in response, we've increased our contact with them, and we've revised our program.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? The sort of push to online actually, I mean, perversely could end up allowing you to almost work with a much broader, definitely from a geographical perspective. But and actually, I guess the difficulty, I guess, from your perspective, is at that point it's always on, isn't it? There's always somebody to help. There's always a service. I mean, how have you been dealing with that, other than very long hours, I imagine, over the last couple of weeks?
I think you're right. One thing we didn't anticipate, and I'm not thanking COVID because I don't want it to be here, but one of the things that it's made us do as an organization is to work online and to realize that lots of the ways in which we're working online really do work. And so I think one of the impacts of working in this way is that we're probably going to redesign and change how we deliver going forward, even post social distancing. And because we're doing it online, we are going to reach more women. So I think all it means for us as an organization is that we've got more fundraising targets, because we're going to need to grow our team. But I think you're right that this kind of pivoting online because of social distancing most certainly has made us understand that we can reach more women if we don't deliver everything we do face to face. And we now know that that can still work and have impact.
It's a funny sort of very thin silver lining, isn't it, of everything that's happening? But almost like I say, it might be something that continues sort of post COVID, hopefully, in terms of that opportunity. But as you said, actually, with a program that's so heavily based on people being together, I think you can get through with digital, can't you? But I really believe these things work best when people really can relate and can be together, don't you? But I mean, what do you think that will be something that will continue, or do you think you'll move back to a more sort of physical setup when we're allowed to, whenever that ends up being? Hey,
it will be a blended approach. So nothing can ever replace the physical, being in the same room as someone. And actually, because as I mentioned, a lot of our women are lonely and they don't necessarily have a good, strong social network. we will never take away that element of being able to physically be in the same space as each other, because what happens through our initiative is women form a sisterhood. They've got a lifelong sisterhood. As a result, they go and have cups of tea together after workshops, they have lunch together, and that will never disappear.
Yeah.
But I think some of the other aspects of what we've always done traditionally face to face can now move online. So for example, the mentoring. So I think it's not going to totally replace the physical in the same space stuff, but I think there'll be elements that we do bring online.
I mean, one of the many things that you guys have been doing is the anti-racism intervention and development program. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think particularly in this period, again, we've seen pretty terrible statistics sort of coming out of the impact on COVID with regards to either from a domestic perspective or much more broadly in terms of from a racism perspective. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're trying to do with this?
Yeah, so obviously for almost a decade now, we've been working in the territory of race equality. That's what we do. And we're working on the ground to ensure that people with more privilege support and engage with people who don't have that privilege because of the color of their skin and, institutional racism and a whole range of other factors. And that's what we do through our core program. We change hearts and minds to our core program. But now there does seem to be a window in which white people are listening and more receptive to the interrogation of their privilege and how that feeds into institutional racism. And unfortunately, and very sadly, it's taken a number of years, and I think probably COVID, for that to happen. People in lockdown have had time to engage with the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not the first time we've heard of a black man being murdered by a policeman, but this seems to have been a moment where it's gained lots of traction and interest. So while there seems to be a window of opportunity for us to have white people listen to where their privilege comes from and interrogate it, and to perhaps reflect on some of the ways in which previously they shut down conversations around race, which then perpetuate the system of racism. We're getting in there. And so we have designed a really fantastic anti-racism development program comprising of 5 modules, which take people on quite a long, intense, deep journey of reflection and also action planning to change how they work within their organizations to become true allies of the anti-racism movement. And I think it's always been needed. I feel now at the moment I'm a bit more optimistic that people really want to engage in that work, which is really difficult work. I mean, it's difficult work for the individual to kind of face that their position in life and what they've achieved could be down to the color of their skin rather than sheer grit or talent.
Absolutely, and I think, as you say, I think there is a kind of a moment, isn't there, in terms of the attention? Because I mean, this is not something new. Clearly, like you say, you guys have been sort of focusing on this for a long time, and actually, as a problem, this has been happening for a very long time, right? So, but do you really believe now, though, that there is that opportunity to change? Because I think while there's been things happening before, I mean, it felt like a social media campaign rather than a movement for real change. But it does feel now to me like there is a greater sort of global attention, but also momentum as well.
I feel there is genuinely a desire amongst people that I've been having conversations with and companies who want to work with us. I feel there is genuinely a commitment to want to change. I don't know how long that's going to last. I mean, George Floyd was murdered, 44 days ago. I can already see on my social media that the people who've been posting extensively about Black Lives Matter, who wouldn't typically post anything, I must say, that's kind of tailing off. But in terms of the conversations we have been having with companies who we are going to be working with, I feel there is genuine interest in shifting. And I don't know if COVID in itself, just as a pandemic, has made people feel more vulnerable and more human. I don't know what it is, but I do feel that now is a moment. In my adult life, I'm 46. I have never, ever seen as many white people as I have in the last 44 days talk about issues of white privilege and white supremacy and systemic racism, though that language has never been in their vocabulary. And these are kind of good people that I know. And I think, you have to be optimistic, right? And I'm an activist at heart, and activists by their nature, look at something that makes them angry, and then they do something about that anger and turn it into a positive. So I'm actually feeling positive at the moment, but I'm also feeling really angry it's taken this long.
Yeah. Well, it's the key there is, as you say, it's doing something about it, isn't it? So, I
Mm.
mean, who is this program for then? Who would be, I mean, for people who are watching now, who would this be for, whether it's organizations or individuals, or how would...
So individuals or organizations, it happens to be that who we are working with in the very near future, as of next week, they're companies. We're working with leadership teams. We're working with tech companies, with creative organizations, potentially a very big digital agency. So typically what we're finding is teams of people want to work with us. And that said, I've also had a few inquiries recently from individuals who want to take part in the training. So I think that it's aimed at anybody who recognizes that within their places of work, there's a lot to be done in terms of diversity. And I had a really interesting, a very frank conversation with someone the other day from quite a big company who was just being really frank about the kind of racism she observes and hears in her company. Shocking. It's like shocking, completely shocking. Not shocking to me because I've worked within the sector and understand that they're quite racist places in many ways. But I think the not so much covert racism, but the really articulated overt racism was a little bit of a surprise to me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it is shocking when you sort of see the, like you say, the overt nature of some of these things. But I mean, it's a fascinating program. I mean, from 11FS's perspective, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that and actually see where we can kind of get involved. Because I think I don't think there's ever an organization that can't do more, as in more things that can be done. So let's have that conversation offline and see how we can help.
Brilliant. I do want to say one thing just on that point before we move on. A lot of diversity training, weirdly, is delivered by people who've got no lived experiences of being othered. And what I feel is one of our absolute strengths that You Make It through our initiative is that it's all facilitated by people who've lived experiences of being treated differently because of the color of their skin. And I think that's something really important for companies to think about when they're looking at addressing anti-racism. Work with people with lived experiences of it.
Yeah. I agree. Like you say, it's I think unless people really understand it, it's going to be very difficult for them to explain the impact that it really has, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's some really interesting questions for you over on LinkedIn. So Deval Gore from London and Partners says, how much progress do you think we can make between, and he says, I say this with a pretty heavy heart, the next protests in a couple of years' time. So, what do you think we can really do? Because, I mean, programs like the one that you're setting up, the changes that we can make within organizations, I mean, like you say, it feels like there's a moment to make real change. But how much progress do you think we can really make?
I think I don't know the answer to that. If I'm absolutely honest, I can say that the first step is for people to really engage and with their privilege and interrogate that before. I think one of the reasons that diversity agendas don't really work in companies is that very often the focus of the training is around numbers and the business case. But there's no real change of hearts and minds from an intellectual and emotional point of view. I think people making decisions around hiring, they haven't shifted. And so our emphasis on our training is around developing an emotional and intellectual connection to the need to change. It's very humanitarian. I think beyond that point, beyond that work, the next stage is obviously for people to create really robust action plans to address diversity and the retention and the recruitment of people of color. I think it's a long process, but I think the first thing that needs to happen is what we're doing through our work, which is that people need to just read more, educate themselves, and have those uncomfortable discussions, but not around stats and business cases. And if you're more diverse, you're going to make more money. That needs to be the after thing. The first thing is to get to people's hearts and minds.
And I think that's I mean, it's hearts and minds from a big organization senior management perspective. Like I say, it's when there isn't a business case for something in very large organizations, it's very difficult to get cut through about it. But I think in many, it must be a very strange setup that the world that they do work in doesn't in any way reflect the world that they live in. And potentially, I guess the problem with what we're seeing here is many organizations are run by middle-aged white guys. Therefore, actually, maybe the world that they live in and the world that they work in do match, so they don't necessarily sort of see that problem. So, I mean, what do you think businesses really sort of lose out on by not having a more inclusive, more diverse organization? And I mean, the sort of push on
they lose out on talent. They lose out on talent, don't they? I worked prior to setting up You Make It, I worked in the cultural and creative industries. I worked in broadcast. Look, I set up my organization from my kitchen table with no money. It's going strong. It's run for now almost 10 years. I'm a talented, resourceful leader. But within those organizations that I worked in, I was treated so badly. I was overlooked. There were so many microaggressions. I would leave those places, actually, and I would never be given the opportunity to get promoted, even though my appraisals were always like, Asma, tick, 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 tick. So what they lose out on is talent. And if you come from a less privileged background, as I did, from a single parent, so many more complications raised in a council estate, went to a terrible school. The story, it goes on and on and on. What we do have is a different lens. We have a resilience that I think is incredible. I mean, get to where I've had to show so much resilience. And so I think you lose out on some really amazing qualities in people that maybe those with an easier path in life have not quite got, if I'm absolutely honest. I work with our women, and our women on our core programs are fantastically resilient because they've gone through so much from a really young age. They're very entrepreneurial in spirit, actually, because no one's really kind of been keeping a check on what they're doing. Like, they've been relatively neglected. So they always come up with their own solutions to problems. So I think they miss out on talent. And I think it's really important. You don't want everyone round a table solving a problem to have exactly the same life experience and lens. You want people to come up with different ideas and different perspectives. So I think that's probably what they miss out on. But also, just from a humanitarian point of view, you miss out on being more human and fair. Like, who wants to run a company that's just intrinsically based on unfairness? I don't. So
well, like you say, that is a responsibility, isn't it? I think from organizations and the people who run organizations, that is a responsibility you carry, I think, as an employer, really, in terms of getting those types of things right. And again, it's like there are no organizations that are perfect at this. And I think if I'm honest with you, in a lot of things that I've seen, not just with this lens, but people not being able to say when things aren't right, or people not being able to, say, we're trying hard at this thing, but it's not working yet, but we're going to be making these changes and we're going to be moving forwards. I think so long as people, to your point earlier on, at any point, at any process, the first part of it is admitting that there's a problem. And once you get over that hurdle, you're doing something about it, right?
Yeah, and that's one of our modules, actually. One of our modules is around checking your privilege. And within that module, there's also some focus on the concept of white fragility. So that thing that stops you from having the humility to say, yeah, there's a problem and we need to do better. So absolutely, I think the humility that's needed to really address that there's a problem and that you've sucked up, it's sucked up probably so much unconscious racism, given that we live in a world that's got a lot of media bias in terms of the representation of people of color, and also, a country that still has not really embedded in the national curriculum the teachings of colonialism and the impact that's had on Native people. I think people don't even know why we're here. They don't even get that we're here because of the history of colonialism. So yeah, I think for a person to but that's about humility. And I think our training tries to embed humility within, people in companies who perhaps have struggled to look at themselves and their practice with a critical eye.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this, goes to, as you said there, in terms of generations and different age groups. And do you think there's a lot here to be done with, going right to education and schooling and everything that's there? This feels to me as important as, getting, writing and arithmetic right. This is like, how you live in the world post school. So do you think there's an opportunity here to work with schools a little bit more to have that impact?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, we're a small organization, and I've just been thinking about how we work with the sorts of partners who then get involved in our core work for our young women. But I was having a conversation with my neighbour's child the other day, and literally the other day, and I was suddenly thinking, and it was about Black Lives Matter, and I was suddenly thinking we really should be going into schools. And the kind of development program that we do here, we could take into schools and modify it for a much younger audience.
Yeah.
Um,
Or even
I also,
for we're doing a workshop live in front of like a couple of thousand people right now, but I think like even just for parents to talk to their children, because with everything that's happened, recently with everything that's happening with BLM, so many parents are now trying to have conversations with their, like I have with a 6 and an 8-year-old, and actually arming parents to have those conversations is it's impactful. It's it might not make the type of change that we need today, but it definitely sows the seeds for
yeah.
generational change, doesn't it?
Exactly. But I think those parents, if we're talking about white parents, before they can have those conversations with their children, need to become educated themselves. And
100%.
so, to your point earlier, is our training just for people who work within companies or individuals? It's open to both. So, if any parents listening want to take part in our development program, we're more than happy to hear from them.
Sounds good. I mean, you've had an amazing journey, like say 10 years with the company. I mean, what's the proudest moment through that? Because I mean, I took a great look at your website. There's so many stories on there, great videos from people who have really been touched by what you've done. I mean, what's been the proudest moment?
But I'm proud very often, actually, in our work and on every program that we run. I guess the moment where we feel super, super, super proud and we can really see and feel the impact is at our graduation events, when our women take to the stage and talk with such confidence and authenticity and power about themselves and their experiences. And I think that for me is always a moment of absolute pride, because what we're doing through our core program, actually, so not the anti-racist development work, but our core program with women, is we're not teaching them to pretend to be anything other than themselves. We're just pulling out the confidence for them to project it. So we're not trying to like create lots of middle class packaged people who have to mask their identities as women of color or as women from working class backgrounds. We're saying just wear that with power and confidence. And I think at graduation, that's when you're good enough as you are. That's what we try and instill. And I think at graduation, those are the moments where I think, oh my God, like these are the moments of absolute pride. But I feel proud every time a woman shows for a workshop, because they have complex lives, but they're still committed to the process of change. Yeah, so I'm proud all the time. It's really hard to pluck out one example, but the pride is always in seeing the change in the women.
Amazing. Well, when you've set somebody up for a better ability to deal with day-to-day life, that's a pretty rewarding thing to be doing. But I mean, what message would you leave people on then? Because I mean, it's 9 o'clock. We better let everybody go and get on with their days. But I mean, what message would you leave employers or businesses that have still a long way to go when it comes to diversity inclusion?
I would say, if you are struggling to find a way through the moment now, which is around taking a look at yourselves and thinking about how you change your practice, talk to me, get in touch with me, and we will help you through the moment, so that you become fairer places and true allies in the fight against racism and for equality.
Fantastic. Well, where can people find out more? Because I think there's going to be a lot of people watching this who want to get involved. What's the URL of the website, and where can people learn more about the organisation?
So the website is www.you, that's you-make-it.org. But also just email me directly, asma@you-make-it.org, and we can have a remote cup of tea via Zoom or a Google Hangout and talk about next steps.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for making the time to join me this morning. Folks, that's all we have for you today. In fact, that's all we have for you this week as well. So today is actually also the last day that I'll be streaming this from my personal LinkedIn account. So on Monday morning, we'll be hopping over to the 11FS LinkedIn account for the breakfast show going forwards. Really, really great lineup for you next week. I'm not going to go through it for two main reasons. I've just about run out of time, and there's a lot of people's names that I would absolutely murder as well. So I'll practice better and do that on Monday. Have a great day, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you the same time, same place on Monday. Have a great day. Goodbye.